All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Legacy United Beast Wars Universe Silverbolt, another figure that I've been pretty excited about for a while. I feel like a new version of Beast Wars Silverbolt is long since overdue, and yeah, this guy is a pretty good figure overall, not without issue, but overall I'm pretty pleased with him. Here he is in his alt mode here, the fusor between, the wolf and the hawk eagle bird. I think he's a hawk. I don't know, some kind of bird. And yeah, no, it's a pretty good mode. The one thing that really does kind of bug me about it is how far back the back legs are, or I guess alternatively how far forward the tail feathers are. I feel like you could kind of get away with doing one or the other. I sort of feel like the legs should just be like here, to be a little bit more proportional rather than like his butt sticking out way past the like where the tail feathers ends. I don't know. I just feel like that's a little bit awkward. The other thing that's kind of strange about this mode is that all four of his legs actually peg into place to be immobile, whereas they don't necessarily have to be, because like these just end up being the robot mode legs and these just end up being the robot mode arms. So like they could have a bit of articulation here, but they actually all do have like tabs that like peg into place. So it's like you can still do some articulation with the limbs, but you can't just like get them in a resting pose without tabbing those in. Otherwise the legs kind of like sit separated like that, which is a little strange. It's not really the end of the world, and those tabs aren't really used for anything else to the best of my knowledge. I don't think they are anyway. So you could conceivably just kind of like trim those off and, just have the same mode, but a little bit more mobile. But, it's not really the end of the world, but, just a weird little complaint. In terms of his head sculpt here, they definitely went for like toy accuracy in terms of the painted detail rather than like show accuracy or even necessarily like wolf accuracy. Like they gave him the same like yellow eyes and like the black pattern on the face there, which it looks fine. It gets across the same look as the original toy, but I do wish that there was like something else picking out the nose as opposed to all the other black detailing in his head. But not the end of the world. Otherwise, I like the painted detail on him a lot. It definitely, captures the same aesthetic as the original toy, which honestly was pretty good to begin with. But yeah, in terms of other articulation, the jaw can open and close about that far. The wings have a few joints here. They can fold up and down on this hinge here, and then on this hinge, and then they can fold in and out on this swivel here. These kind of have some like weird sort of like soft locking spots. Like it's either out like that or up like that, and anything in between you're kind of like cheating that like soft ratchet. And the same thing with these, there's just kind of like a ridge there that it gets past, which is a little bit annoying. I wish that those were just a little bit more free moving, because it's like surprisingly difficult to get them into a nice pose like this, like you want them to, without like getting those soft ratchets kind of like in between their clicks there, which is not too hard to do, but it's just a little bit annoying when messing around with this guy. But yeah, you can get them like with those wings folded up like this, or kind of like spread out to the side. Mostly it works. It's just a little bit more annoying than it had to be. Obviously much better than the completely static wings that the original one had, but worth mentioning. And then if you untab the front legs here, obviously it has a swivel forward and back and can hinge out to the side, thigh swivel, knee joint, which doesn't really bend up any more than that, and then the foot can kind of tilt forward and back. There is also an ankle tilt for robot mode, but I don't think that's like particularly useful in this mode. And then for the back legs here, the knee can't go any further forward. It can go about one click forward that way until before the like arm starts coming with it. And then obviously it's got the universal joints at the hips as well if you untab them. So decent articulation, nothing too crazy. Really, the wings are the biggest improvement over the original toy. But otherwise he's pretty similar, honestly, except just different joints arrangements and things like that. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, just for a standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe, so you can see what he looks like with him. And yeah, here he is with the original Silverbolt from Beast Wars. Obviously this guy was a bit more of a deluxe, and this guy is a voyager, but you can see a lot of the similarities there just in terms of like how they handled the painted detail. There are some things I like better about this one and some things I like better about the original one, just in terms of like especially how the beast mode is oriented. I mean, the tail feathers alone on the original I think are much better than the new one, but I kind of get why they did it that way for, how it works for transformation and robot mode, but still a little bit weird. But yeah, otherwise, I do think he's an improvement overall. It's really just like this whole back section that I feel like just looks a little bit odd. Like it either looks like his legs are sticking way out past his butt or his tail feathers are just way too short. And, since the tail feathers are what his tail is and he doesn't have like a dog tail or anything, that makes it just look like super strange. So, not a fan of that, but otherwise, that's what they look like together. And then here he is with Black Arachnia, most importantly, and then the other sort of like, final 6 members of the Maximal team in Beast Wars by the last episode. And yeah, I mean, obviously, by the last episode, the only 2 that were actually in this form were Rhinox and Silverbolt. The rest of them all had different bodies, but still, that's what they all look like together. And, he did share a lot of screen time with the season 1 incarnation with Black Arachnia, most of the show, actually. But that's what they all look like together. I feel like that's a pretty good little setup there. And yeah, to get onto transformation, he has a surprising amount different from the original Silverbolt toy, because like, honestly, I thought that they could just kind of do like, the Earthrise Starscream kind of thing where they just took the update, like made an updated version of like the classics design. They could have just done that with this guy for the original toy, because like the original toy is pretty spot on. Like, it's proportionally not perfect and the wings could have been handled better and then painted detail could have been better, but otherwise it's pretty spot on to how he was in the show. So like, they really didn't have to reinvent the wheel with this guy, but they kind of did. And I do understand why they did it for, some technical reasons, but ultimately it does kind of feel like they're just making it different for the sake of making it different. And I think that there are some areas that are, kind of not improvements because of that. But either way, how we start with the transformation is we'll just untab the legs here and just straighten them out like this. And then click the feet into place here. And then we actually want to rotate these around at the hip, which is different from how the original toy did it. Then we want to take the head, untab it like this and bring it up on that panel, and take the tail feathers and bring that up. And then you actually take this whole section and rotate it around like that, which is completely different than how the original one did it. And then just fold the tail feathers back down. Take this panel and fold it down to be his codpiece, whereas on the original, the codpiece was made up of the back of the figure. Then we can take his arms here, which instead of doing like the full flip around are actually already back here and then kind of backwards from how they were on the original. And you just want to untap those and then bring these joints around and click these joints into place, and then click this whole section into place just like that. Which, now that I'm looking at it, are these the same tabs? Yeah, I guess you probably shouldn't trim those tabs because these tabs are actually used. I don't know if they're actually necessary though for clicking these into place, but those were the ones that held in the back legs. But then you can take the back of the legs here and just fold them up onto the back of his arms and straighten out the rest of his arms there. And then take the head, fold it out of the body just enough so that you can take the wolf head and fold this into the body, and then you can fold the head back down. And there we have Silverbolt in his robot mode. And yeah, I've got my grievances about the way the alt mode is handled, but the robot mode is just wonderful looking. I think he's really great. Now, some of the big differences and why the transformation would be so different is one of the things that this allows for is a waist swivel, which the original one couldn't have because of how the legs kind of unfolded like that. And it also means that his wings end up on his back rather than like sitting off of his shoulders, which I do think looks better overall. In terms of accuracy of the show, they really should be kind of like halfway in between. So they're kind of like sitting off his shoulder pads, but have the capability of being swept back rather than being straight up like, angel wings on his back. I also kind of wish that this whole section had some capability of like sitting a little further up so that the tail feathers aren't floating, as far down as they were, which is really weird considering how short they look in robot mode, how far they sit down how short they look in alt mode for how long that it ends up sitting in robot mode. Gosh, my words are not working today. But, those are, again, all kind of minor complaints with this guy, because overall, I think that he does really look the part. I think he looks really nice in terms of articulation. The head's on a ball joint here, which can rotate around like that. I do find that it has that annoying thing where it kind of like clicks into place looking straight forward, and it's hard to adjust it just a little bit. Also, mine has a tiny little paint blemish on his cheek there, which is a bit annoying, but otherwise that's okay. The shoulders are on universal joints, which can rotate around like that, fold out to the side. He's got a bicep swivel. He does have a full elbow bend, though at a certain point it will kind of pull the back dog leg with it. So he only really has like a 90-degree bend before that happens. But also in the show, even when he bent his elbows up, the like dog legs were hanging off to the side anyway. So that's kind of okay. I feel like that works relatively well. He also has a wrist swivel, which is nice. He's got a waist joint, which you kind of have to move the tail feathers out of the way, but otherwise it functions pretty well. Then the hips can go forward a lot, back quite a bit too, out to the side. He's got a thigh swivel. He's got a little over 90 degrees of bend at the knee, and weirdly, his knee kind of like clicks in place here. Like, I get why it clicks in place for alt mode, but I don't really see why it clicks like that in robot mode, because then it's either like his knee is like that or like that and nothing in between. Again, you could just kind of shave down this tab a little bit if that really bothers you, but it is a little bit strange. And then his feet can't tilt forward. They can unclick and tilt back for transformation. And then he does have a sort of like soft ratcheted ankle tilt, which is pretty nice as well. And I feel like this guy turned out pretty well, all things considered, especially in the robot mode. Now, he does have his little wing weapons here, which are no longer spring loaded, but they just tab onto the side of the wing, so they can look a little bit more accurate to how they did in the show, and he can hold those in his hands there. And obviously that's really nice weapon storage, completely unobtrusive in both modes. It's just part of the alt mode, and I think that he looks pretty good. When I'm like posing him, I do kind of wish he had like ball jointed wrists or something so that he could kind of like fold his hand down a little bit and point these, but that would be pretty atypical. There aren't that many figures that actually do that. It just would have been nice. Also worth mentioning is that these are like weirdly keyed to specific sides of the wings. You can see like the tabs on there are not symmetrical, so you do have to have this one on this side and this one on the other side, which, with the hollow sections of the wings, I think that's how you'd want it anyway. I don't know why they felt the need to key it like that specifically, but it is there. And then obviously the wings still have all the same articulation as they did before. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, here he is again with Kingdom Sideswipe, just so you can see what he looks like with a standard average modern deluxe here. Gosh, words. But yeah, definitely a lot bigger than the original one there. Speaking of which, here he is with the original Silverbolt, just so you can see a lot of the differences there. Definitely, I feel like this guy's robot mode really does take the cake over the original. He has those hard time standing because of the way that the bird feet thing going on, whereas the new one has nice flat feet, so that works super well. The way that the wings are handled is a lot better, even if neither is like totally 100% accurate to how he had them in the show. I do feel like this makes for a better toy overall. But yeah, still a lot of the similar details there. You can see like what's kind of funny too is because of how the transformation works so differently, he actually ends up with these like weird sort of like cheated hinges on his shoulders here, because this one has hinges because of how it folds around like that, which this one doesn't do. So they made that part of his show design. So now to replicate the show design, he still has those hinges there, even though his arms transform completely differently. Now they like fold up like that. So this hinge is just like a bit of sculpting. It's not actually anything there, which is kind of funny. It's not enough to actually like bother me in terms of like the way other like cheated bits do. I just think it's kind of funny. But yeah, no, overall, I think proportionally he's a lot better. I do kind of miss, it's better that he doesn't have hollow thighs, but I do kind of miss the like bones sculpted on the inside of his thighs and inside of his arms there. But obviously better to just have those parts be solid, which is nice. And then here he is again with Black Arachnia, just so you can see what the two of them look like together. And I definitely feel like this works a lot better than our new Black Arachnia and this Silverbolt, just because, obviously I think that they, compensated here by making them both a little bit bigger than they were in the show. Like Black Arachnia really was a little bit smaller than this in the show compared to the other characters, but I'd rather they make Silverbolt a much bigger guy so that they could actually, work well together, so that they can kind of scale properly how they did in the show, because he was really quite a lot bigger than she was in the show. And of course, here he is again with the rest of the surviving Maximals at the end of the show as well, just so you can see what he looks like with the full team there. A little bit taller than Optimus Primal, but again, this version of Optimus Primal was never on screen with Silverbolt, so he was by the end of the show was the Optimal Optimus version, which was a lot bigger, and then even the Transmetal version was a little bit bigger too. So like, it scales all over the place, but it's fine. I feel like that this works well. He works as a kind of bigger character. I do think he was probably not as big as Rhinox was in the show, since these two actually were in these forms till the end. But I'm kind of fine with it. I feel like that they all look relatively good together. And yeah, no, overall, I'd say like I said, I feel like I'm sounding a little bit harsh on this figure just because I was so excited for this, and there are some areas that I'm not just like as in love with him as I thought I'd be. But overall, he is still a very good figure and definitely a very like decent improvement to the design here. And it's nice to actually have an updated version of this character that like scales well with everything else and has all the proper painted detail and all of that. Though I do kind of wish that he maybe had like silver picking out his like spikes in the middle here, because it feels again like they went a little bit too toy accurate in terms of the color scheme, because like aside from the head, like the color scheme really hasn't made much improvements over the original, and the original one definitely felt like he was lacking some details there. Like it works overall, but still it's like you'd kind of want it to be a little bit more updated to being to make it like even more accurate to the show. But that's pretty much all there is to him. A pretty cool figure, even if I have my my few complaints here. But yeah, if you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Legacy United Voyager class Beast Wars Universe Silverbolt.